Throughout hockey history, few players have epitomized goon like Marty McSorley. Over his 17 seasons in the NHL, the menacing McSorley racked up nearly 3,400 penalty minutes, striking fear into the hearts of opponents with his violent streak and pugilistic prowess, and ultimately cementing himself as one of the most tenacious enforcers the game has ever seen.
He's got no chest protection, no back protection, and he's still that big.
As the sun was setting on his career, however, McSorley went overboard on a tense night in Vancouver.
He wanted my respect. I couldn't show him any respect.
Committing an act of on-ice violence so reckless that it not only earned him a dubious place in NHL history, but effectively ended his career.
I don't know what Marty McSorley was thinking.
The truth is, even before that fateful night in 2000, Marty McSorley was always going to be remembered as a thug. He spent the prime of his career and became a household name, serving as Wayne Gretzky's bodyguard, protecting the Great One at all costs in both Edmonton and Los Angeles.
Marty has one thing on his mind: retaliate for the hit that Tkachuk put on Gretzky.
And McSorley compiled a pretty extensive rap sheet in the line of duty. Prior to the 1999-2000 campaign, McSorley was suspended 7 times for various goonish incidents, including, most notably, gouging an opponent's eye during a fight. And nearly 2 decades of intimidating, bruising, and pummeling ultimately landed McSorley in the top 5 all-time in penalty minutes and the top 10 all-time in fighting majors. That said, McSorley's well-deserved reputation obscured the fact that he was also a versatile player who could play both forward and defense, and whose skill set extended beyond eye gouging. Throughout his career, the 2-time Stanley Cup champion tallied double-digit goals 5 times, and in 1990-1991, McSorley actually finished tied for the NHL lead in plus-minus, a feat typically accomplished by guys like Gretzky or Bobby Orr. At his best, McSorley was a more complete player than people give him credit for, but certainly by the end of his career, McSorley's usefulness resided entirely in his ability to intimidate and his willingness to throw down. That's what landed a 36-year-old McSorley a 1-year deal with the Boston Bruins midway through the 1999-2000 campaign. The Bruins needed some toughness, and McSorley, whose career was seemingly over after he'd recorded just 5 points in 46 games the season prior in his second stint with Edmonton, was available. Little did everyone know, however, that McSorley's last-ditch effort to prolong his career in Boston would produce one of the most regrettable moments the NHL has ever seen. Heading into the home stretch of the 1999-2000 campaign, the Bruins were scuffling. The team that had gone to the conference finals the season prior was on the outside looking in at a playoff spot, and longtime captain Ray Bourque was weeks away from being traded. Things were bleak, and when the Bruins took the ice at Vancouver's General Motors Place on February 21st, they hadn't won a game in more than 2 weeks. The stage was set for things to pop off. And sure enough, barely 2 minutes into the game, with the Bruins somehow already trailing, McSorley got into a fight with Vancouver's foremost enforcer and another all-time goon, Donald Brashear.
Let's see who makes the first move. Well, McSorley threw once, lost his balance. Goes Brashear, a very tough guy, as is Marty McSorley. And Brashear has become an all-around player this season.
By all accounts, Brashear won that fight, and as he settled into the penalty box, he even taunted McSorley. And this wasn't the first time that Brashear got the best of McSorley. Throughout their careers, the 2 heavyweights threw down at least a half-dozen times. And if the scorecards on hockeyfights.com are to be trusted, Brashear emerged victorious more often than not. All of that is to say, McSorley wanted redemption. That much was clear. In fact, later on in the first period, McSorley cross-checked Brashear to try to provoke him into another scrap, but Brashear didn't take the bait. Instead, McSorley earned himself a 10-minute misconduct. Things only escalated from there. With McSorley in the penalty box, Brashear ran some interference in front of Boston's net and ended up injuring Bruins goaltender Byron Defoe. And as if McSorley and the Bruins weren't already steamed enough, in the third period, with Vancouver up big, Brashear, in an obvious taunt, flexed his muscles at the Bruins bench.
He's flexing and challenging our bench. Now, as a tough guy, that's not acceptable.
Well, that was the last straw. With the third period winding down and Brashear out on the ice, Bruins coach Pat Burns sent McSorley out there for one explicit purpose.
And I'm basically told, get out there, just get out there. So now I gotta go get him. And I'm gonna make him fight me.
Only they didn't end up fighting. Instead, in a desperate attempt to get Brashear to throw down with time expiring, McSorley delivered a vicious, reckless cheap shot for the ages.
Well, McSorley is out there as well. Oh, McSorley slashed Brashear and caught him in the helmet. Wow. Donald Brashear is down and maybe out.
Look, hockey is a violent game, but that slash to the head was so far beyond the pale, it was sickening. McSorley later apologized and stressed that he wasn't trying to hit him in the head.
It's special to play in the NHL and go and do something like that. I didn't mean to, that's not what I had intended to do. I wanted to go fight.
But, well, that was little consolation for Brashear, who was rendered unconscious and went into convulsions after the back of his skull crashed into the ice. And then all hell broke loose.
And Bart Stowe has gone after McSorley.
Boy, I'll tell you what the ugly part of this is what's being thrown on the ice.
Oh, it appears that Donald Brashear is bleeding from the nose. I don't know what Marty McSorley was thinking.
No kidding. It was just horrific. Eventually, Brashear was stretchered off the ice and the game wrapped up, but this saga was far from over. The Canucks, understandably, were apoplectic. Vancouver defenseman Matthias Olin described McSorley's blindside slash to Brashear's head as the worst thing he'd ever seen and called for the NHL to throw the book at him. As he told the Vancouver Sun, if McSorley plays another game in this league, then this league is a bleeping joke. That guy should be treated the same as if he tried to kill a guy on the street. And as it turned out, Olin's comments were quite prescient. First, the NHL suspended McSorley for the remainder of the season, a total of 23 games, which at the time constituted the longest suspension for an on-ice incident in NHL history. And critically, McSorley wasn't guaranteed reinstatement at the end of his suspension. He'd have to meet with NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman and Vice President Colin Campbell, who could decide at that point to extend his suspension. Which, in the end, they did, after McSorley was convicted in court for his on-ice violence. An attack that ultimately gave Brashear a grade 3 concussion and sidelined him for 20 games.
That's what kind of sucked because I had like 11 goals that year, and that was the last year of my contract too. So had I scored like 20 goals, I would have been able to show that I can be the player that I want to be.
In October of 2000, a British Columbia judge found McSorley guilty of assault with a weapon, rejecting McSorley's claim that he tried to hit Brashear in the shoulder. It marked the first instance of an NHL player getting convicted for an on-ice incident since 1988, when Dino Ciccarelli was sentenced to 1 day in jail for attacking Luke Richardson with his stick. However, McSorley didn't serve any time. Instead, he received a conditional discharge, which not only allowed him to skirt jail time, but also meant that his conviction was eventually expunged from his record. Still, in the wake of his conviction, the NHL decided to extend his suspension. Ultimately, the league decided on a 1-year ban for McSorley, an unprecedented judgment that effectively ended his career. See, McSorley's contract expired while he was serving his suspension, and by the time he was eligible to return to the ice, no NHL team was interested in the much demonized 37-year-old. So, in addition to being the defining moment of his career, McSorley's attack on Brashear was also the final act of his career, a reality that was both upsetting and fitting given his history.
People want to view that or whatever that ended your career or what have you. I'm comfortable with the fact that I went out the same way I came in. I challenged Donald Brashear to a fight. I wanted him to fight me. I felt that he should fight me. I was disappointed in him as a hockey person.
On the other hand though, Brashear ended up playing 9 more seasons in the NHL after the attack. He bruised his way to more than 1,000 career games and ultimately solidified himself as one of the most prolific fighters in league history. And get this, as of 2024, Brashear was still playing professional hockey, banging it out in a Quebec-based league despite being in his 50s. But who knows where Brashear would be now had he gotten a bit more unlucky on that awful night in Vancouver almost 25 years ago.
He really tried to injure me, and I could have died.
And today, it's fair to say that McSorley's attack on Brashear was an inflection point in hockey's evolution away from the blatant thuggery and hyper-violent culture that colored the game for so long. With the possible exception of Todd Bertuzzi's infamous attack on Steve Moore years later, no incident of on-ice violence more effectively laid bare the senselessness and destructiveness of hockey's code of violence. And as an institution, hockey has since moved farther away from those antiquated ideals in favor of a better, safer game. But that change came at a great cost. To Donald Brashear, of course, but also to Marty McSorley, the consummate goon whose most famous act of grotesque violence was also his last in the NHL. Thanks for watching. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button.